All right. All right, everybody, good morning. We've just started our live webinar with Annalyn. We're going to give it a few moments for folks to start joining us. As you know, we've got folks joining us from about every UC campus location possible. So we'll be making sure folks get a moment to, get into their single sign-on and then get into the webinar for this morning. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to be kicking things off in just a few moments. Thank you all so much for joining us on our last day of the Now conference. Oh my gosh, it's Friday. Can you believe it? We're almost to the weekend. It's gonna be great. We have a full day of exciting stuff going on today, starting with Annalyn's presentation, and then we'll have our group coaching, and then we'll have our one-on-one coaching through the day, 11 to 5 for those who have signed up. Again, welcome to folks who are joining us. We're giving it a few moments for folks to go ahead and mosey into the room before we get started. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. We're going to be getting started in just a moment. All right, let's go ahead and get things started. Good morning, UC. My name is Colin. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Senior Talent Strategy Partner at UC Berkeley People and Culture, People and Organization Development Team, and I will be your moderator for today's session. This year I have the honor of serving as the Coaching HQ lead at the 2023 Now Conference, and we are just about to kick off our final day of Now Week 2023. Oh my gosh, we had over 900 in attendance yesterday for the main day of the conference, in-person Now Conference at the Oakland Marriott. Wow, we so thank you for your attendance. We hope you had a full day of reconnecting, recharging, and reimagining. For those attending the final day of our Coaching at HQ activities, we look forward to working with you during the group coaching sessions at 10 and the one-on-one coaching sessions from 11 to 5 through the rest of the day. As a reminder, all sessions are full and registration is closed. Invitations were sent to registrants to their UC email account via nowcoachinghq@berkeley.edu. I'd also like to take a moment to recognize our main conference sponsor, UC Berkeley People and Culture. A huge thanks to Dr. Angela Stopper, our Chief Learning Officer and Director of People and Organization Development, for her executive sponsorship of the Now Conference, this biggest of its kind UC-wide event. It's amazing just to be able to be in presence with you all yesterday. Incredibly empowering and motivating experience, sharing in that reconnection and recharging and reimagining with representatives from 14 different UC campuses and locations. Still just reeling from yesterday's activities, sessions, keynotes, networking, our mindfulness lunchtime, and all of that belonging building and community building together in the UC. Another huge shout out to Lisa Reicher and Ying Hua for their excellent Now Conference co-chair leadership and the entire Now Conference planning team for their efforts in bringing this conference to life. We're going to get started in just a moment. Please note that this session is recorded. No one can see your video. It's a webinar, so it won't be recorded. The presentation slide deck can be found on the Now Conference webpage, and you can also access it using the resources button within the webinar panel today in Zoom. The chat is disabled for today's session. The Q&A is enabled. So as you go through and you have questions, Annalyn will be taking a look at those questions as they come through, and we'll also have a chance to do Q&A at the end of our session for today. So feel free also to toggle on or off captioning for today's webinar presentation. As a reminder, the interactive portion of this webinar follows with the group coaching for those who have registered. I have the pleasure of welcoming everyone to Real Talk, Advocate, and Negotiate Salary with Authenticity and Courage, presented by the amazing Annalyn Cruz from Grounded in Wisdom, LLC. Annalyn Cruz is a dream life and leadership coach, space holder, and storyteller that guides women and BIPOC leaders to heal their inner critic, connect to what they really love, and confidently become the best version of themselves. Annalyn is the CEO and founder of Grounded in Wisdom, LLC, and has 20 years experience of career experience where she's founded, focused on leadership development, employee engagement, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Her bigger why has always led her to ensure that those she served felt a sense of belonging, felt seen and heard, and guided those to find their own powerful voice and agency in a world that often told them otherwise. Annalyn has felt especially pulled towards serving those within underrepresented communities and identities. Annalyn believes that when we truly let go of perfectionism, yes, discover the impact of our gremlins or our inner critics, face our fears of what holds us back, and embody both the fierce and vulnerable sides of ourselves, we come back to our grounded center and live powerfully with ease and flow and continual evolution. She loves to witness the transformation that happens with her clients, particularly when they powerfully say yes to embracing their new ways of being and become the best version of themselves. As a Filipina, Asian American, and first generation woman of color with immigrant parents, Annalyn knows the challenges of navigating between multiple identities and worlds. She's passionate about the intersections of cultural upbringing, gender, and other identities that play into one's career and life journey. She currently lives in Oakland, California, within the Bay Area with her amazing dog, Cab, who has been one of her greatest teachers in presence and fun. Annalyn enjoys joyful movements, writing poetry, and her memoir. So excited to read one day, meditation and energy healing. So with that, okay, everybody, a big, warm UC welcome to Annalyn Cruz.
Thank you, Colin. So excited to be here with all of you for the Now Conference. Woohoo!
Yes.
So thank you so much for being here today and being a part of this session. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And Colin, you let me know when you could see it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We got it, and it looks great. The floor is yours.
All right. Here we are, people. Okay, so I'm excited to be here with all of you to not only focus on the tools and the resources available to you with salary negotiations, but also have you start reflecting and identifying your mindset when it comes to this topic of salary negotiations. I'm also going to share some of my own personal stories and journey along the way as it relates to this very important topic. And what I really want is for us to normalize talking about salaries and being more transparent with one another and learning how to advocate for yourself in situations that go even beyond salary negotiations and some of the challenges that can happen along the way. And I just want to set up some expectations right away to say that I'm a leadership and dream life coach. I'm a speaker who has also been a former Cal employee. So if I look familiar to you, I was at Berkeley from 2008 to 16. So I am not a current employee and do not work for talent acquisition or total rewards. So I won't be getting into all of those nuts and bolts here today for this webinar. So I encourage you to talk with your HR business partner or your TA rep if you have more questions around that of applying for a particular position or interviewing or anything related to compensation. So after the webinar, many of you know that you'll have the opportunity to dive in deeper with your own group coaching session. So things that we're going to be talking about here, you could bring your questions and bring your perspectives there. And then you're also going to be practicing some of the courageous conversations that I'm going to be sharing with you all in order for you to set yourself up for success. Okay. So one of the things that I always love to do in my sessions, whether it's a leadership development course or any sort of speaking engagement I have, is to allow ourselves the time to just ground, right? So let's get into some breath work. And this signals to both our bodies and our brains that we're here, we're present, and we're in this community together. So even though I can't see you, I could still feel your energy. Please drop in a question if you have that during this time. And I'm going to invite you right now to just slow down. You can turn off any notifications you have going on and just pause all those things. And let's just try and commit to being in this space together. Okay. So I invite you to put one hand on your heart, one hand on your belly, and you could close your eyes or keep a soft gaze somewhere in your room if that feels comfortable and safe. And let's just take 3 mindful breaths together. So let's go ahead and take an inhale. You're going to feel your belly rise and expand. You're going to feel your chest expand. Hold it at the top. And exhale. Awesome. Let's do that a couple more times. Take that powerful inhale. I'm aware of my in-breath. And exhale. I'm aware of my out-breath. You're doing great. One more time. Let's go ahead and take that powerful inhale. And exhale. Awesome. Can we do some shoulder rolls back and forward? We're here. Happy Friday. Thank you for joining me in this space. So let's get started, shall we? So some of the learning objectives that we are going to get after today. So you're going to be able to identify your mindset when it comes to challenging situations or what you find challenging in advocating for both your professional and career development, which includes salary negotiations. The second thing is you're going to be able to reflect on some of your own various identities. We come from different backgrounds, different perspectives. We may have multiple identities. I'm sure you do, as do I. And we're going to just kind of dive in of how that influences how we may show up in the workplace and our comfort level as well when it comes to salary negotiations. We're also going to review some practical tips and strategies and actions related to, advocating for yourself in the workplace. And finally, we're going to identify some community support that you have within your circle. I like to call this my hype crew of members. So that could be mentors, sponsors, your manager, your skip level leader, peers around you, right? There's so much power in our hype crew and how they could help support and develop each and every single one of us as it relates to your development and your path moving forward. So that's what we're going to get after today. So I have a reflection question for you all, which is, when you hear the term salary negotiation, what thoughts or feelings come to mind? And I would also say, what do you sense in your body? I know that for a long time, when I heard the term salary negotiation, my heart would start beating a bit quicker, or I'd feel a little bit of the butterflies in my stomach. So just notice for yourself right now, when you hear that term, salary negotiation, what thoughts or feelings come up for you? So I would say oftentimes in working with my clients and just colleagues over the years, and from my own personal experience, you might fall into category A, which is, it makes me anxious. I'm nervous about it. I feel some fear around having that conversation. I don't know what to expect, or the process is confusing or ambiguous, and it's just a mystery I cannot solve for, right? And then there might be another category of folks who can actually see this as an opportunity, right? As a positive one. They could be excited about it or hopeful. You might come in with more confidence in these conversations or thinking about the concept of salary negotiation or just appreciating that process. So I would say, again, based on my experience as a coach and as a manager and all of the different roles I've had and within my own personal life, most people fall into category A. So my goal for this particular webinar is that by the end of our time together, that I get you at least 1% closer to being in category B, because I really think that there's a lot of power around getting to a place of feeling more comfortable, feeling more confident and hopeful as this experience progresses for yourself. Okay. So that's the goal that I have as your facilitator and as your presenter. So the next thing I want to talk about is to identify your mindset when it comes to salary negotiation. So I kind of set this up earlier of just checking in with yourself, right? Like, where am I in terms of how I feel about when I think about advocating for myself as it relates to salary negotiation, going up for a reclass, all the different scenarios that could happen. So I'm going to show you a quick video right now that can give you a bit more of a framework around, where am I in terms of how I feel about salary negotiations, and how can that help or hinder me as I move forward in advocating for myself in terms of my salary. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and play that right now.
Location, location, location. Brought to you by the Conscious Leadership Group. Find them on the web at www.conscious.is. Animation by Graham Franks, www.grahamfranks.com. One question that conscious leaders ask themselves over and over is, where am I? To support leaders in locating themselves as they ask the question, where am I? We offer this tool, a line, a simple black line. At any moment, all leaders and all people are either above the line or below the line. Our location describes how we're being with what is occurring in our life right now. If we're above the line, we are open, curious, and committed to learning. If we are below the line, we are closed, defensive, and committed to being right. Stop right now and simply ask yourself, where am I? In this now moment, am I above the line or below the line? Typically, when people are below the line, they believe certain things about the world. For example, they believe there is not enough. It could be that there's not enough money, or time, or space, or energy, or love. People below the line also believe that their story about the situation is right. People below the line also believe that there is a threat out there. Something or someone is threatening their desire for approval, control, or security. And people below the line see the situation as serious. The deeper below the line they are, the more serious things look. People below the line tend to behave certain ways as well. They tend to cling to an opinion, find fault and blame, gossip, explain, rationalize and justify, get overwhelmed, and avoid conflict or pursue conflict for the sake of winning. When people are above the line, they believe that learning and growing are more important than being right. They believe that all people and circumstances are their allies, here for their growth. They believe that from a distance, almost everything is funny. People above the line live in curiosity, listen deeply, speak unarguably, question all their beliefs, and live a life of play. Now, knowing what you know about being above or below the line, where are you? One thing to know as you consider this question: we're hardwired to go below the line. Literally, our brain is programmed to perceive threat, and when it does, a chemical cocktail courses through our veins, and we go below the line. This reaction was designed to help us survive in the presence of a real threat to our physical survival. An issue for modern-day leaders is that often our brains can't tell the difference between a threat to our physical survival and a threat to our ego or identity. We react and get defensive when we experience a threat to our ego. So in many ways, being below the line is natural and normal. But when we are below the line, we're not in a state, literally brain state, of high creativity, collaboration, innovation, and relational connection. We're simply trying to survive. Leaders today can't thrive if they're in survival mode. So the first activity of conscious leadership is location, location, location. In this now moment, where am I? Telling ourselves and others the truth about our current location begins the great conversation.
Awesome. So I'm going to go back to my slides here. So as you listened in on that, hold on just one second, Cheryl. So as you listened in on that particular video, what I really wanted to point out here is that, and I will speak for myself, when I've done salary negotiations in the past or just started to uncover what that process could be like for myself, I was below the line. And what that means for me was that I often thought, this isn't going to happen for me, or, I don't know if they see my value. I was tying my self-worth and value to the actual outcome of that conversation. And I was just coming from a more fearful place. Okay. So if you are feeling that way right now, there's no judgment around that, because I know that these conversations could bring some butterflies. It can make you perhaps feel anxious or nervous. And again, for this webinar, I really want you to consider, how can I be above the line when it comes to approaching salary negotiations or even advocating for myself? Can I see this as an opportunity to really hone in on, what are my strengths? What is my impact in the work that I do, in my team, for this department, for my division, for the campus, right? And when I started to shift my perspective of, okay, so regardless of whether I get this salary bump or not, whether I get this reclass or not, I know within myself what I have to offer. And I know that I have a lot of talents and gifts to share. And this process will only make me more confident in moving forward, regardless if you stay in this position or you move on somewhere else. I always believe that this process can help each and every single one of us get more clear, right? Get more clear and get more confident throughout this conversation or throughout this process. So let's go ahead and take the 10,000 foot view. And what I mean by that is that, while this webinar is focused in on salary negotiations, I really want us to kind of take a higher level and think about it from a self-advocacy umbrella. So what do I mean when I say self-advocacy in the workplace? And here's my own definition of it. So my definition is that self-advocacy is a powerful and courageous act of sharing one's point of view in terms of development, salary talks, types of projects or work that one would want to do more of or less of. And it's a way to share one's talents and strengths to others. Now, when I say that, this is not easy, y'all, right? I would say that this is not an easy thing to, one, deliberately and consciously make a choice to do this and show up in this way and to do the work that it takes in order to share these thoughts and feelings, whether it's with your manager or your mentor, or honestly, peers around you, which have so much strength and power in of itself, right? It's a conscious and deliberate action and behaviors that you would have to take on in order to advocate for yourself. And I believe it's so worth it, right? And here's the other thing I want to note, and I want to say this a couple of times, because I've seen over the years within myself, within friends, colleagues, clients that I have coached, that oftentimes they don't do this, right? So I want to repeat this. Your self-worth is not tied to the outcome of the conversation or final decision. Again, your self-worth, your value is not tied to the outcome of the conversation or final decision. And I know for myself over the years, I have put too much stake into having external validation be the process in which I started looking like, am I worthy of this? Am I worthy of a salary increase? Or is my, is it tied to someone else's opinion or what the ultimate outcome of that conversation is? And I just want to say, regardless of how this turns out, your self-worth is not tied to it. That's my true belief in all of this. So I just wanted to name that and wave the flag on that particular piece. Okay. So the next part is you're going to do a lot more reflection and being able to talk about this in your group coaching next. But I just want you to think to yourself, and maybe you want to journal this down. I want you to reflect on a time when you successfully advocated for yourself in the past. So you could identify some of your own behaviors, the knowledge you had, the help you received from others that made this successful for you. And again, what was your mindset? Were you above or below the line? What was your approach? How were you successful? I remember when I was at Berkeley, I talked to many colleagues, many of my women colleagues around campus who had similar jobs to me, and they were so gracious and open and generous in sharing their knowledge with me, sharing how they were able to get a promotion or how they were able to successfully get reclassed. And if it wasn't for those folks on campus, I would not have been able to do the same, right? So that's one of my success stories is I was open and I reached out to my network in order to get the knowledge and to get the intel, right? These are conversations that we don't often have on a daily basis. So it's getting the courage, it's taking the initiative to have these types of conversations all around, okay? So I also wanted to share a quick story with you all. So when I was at Cal, I worked for Student Affairs Learning and Development, and I worked myself from a project analyst 2 to a 3, to then becoming an organizational consultant 3. And my boss at the time, my manager, was absolutely supportive of all of the increases and all of the reclasses and moves. But each step of that journey, I had to advocate for myself. And whether that was asking point blank about budgetary conversations that he was having with his leader, or at the time looking at the Career Compass job classifications and distinctions between each of those roles, right? And making a whole spreadsheet and columns and really understanding what it meant from going from a 2 to a 3. Okay, well, I'm already doing the work of, for example, project analyst 3. What else do I need to do? How else can I show up in a way that really demonstrates that I can work at higher levels, right? So while I had some experience in the past advocating for myself, I wasn't always successful or confident enough about my skills and my abilities to do that in past roles or with other managers. And as I reflect back, there were some other factors at play, and I'm going to share with you all about that in the next section. So again, the point of this story is while I had an amazing boss, I still had to initiate parts of the process and conversations about my own development and growth. I had to drive it, right? And something else, again, to note about that time, I did think that my self-worth was tied to my promotions. And obviously, I feel very different now. So let's talk about some nuances and challenges with self-advocating. And let's talk about the elephant in the room, right? So I'm going to share with you just a little bit of research by Hannah Riley Bowles of the Harvard Kennedy School and other colleagues she worked with about some of this disheartening research, right? So you can see here, deeply ingrained societal gender roles of women as passive, being seen as passive, being seen as helpful and accommodating. So as a result, their requests often faced a backlash relative to men who were asking for more money, right? Women were penalized financially. They were considered less hireable, less likable, and less likely to be promoted, while as men, on contrast, were generally can negotiate for higher pay, right? Without facing the same type of backlash, because such behavior is consistent with the stereotype of men as assertive, bold, and self-interested. And there's also the gender piece, is one aspect of the pay gap, but there's also race and culture, right? Let's name it. So in 2016, college-educated Black men earned about 80% of the hourly wages of college-educated white men. And Black men overall earned just 68% of those earned by white men. And also in 2016, Latinx, Hispanic women earned only about 62.2% of wages of white men. And while Asian women fared a little bit better, they were still only earning about 78.4% of what Asian men made that year. Now, I share this with you all because I think we need to name it. I think we need to name that there is bias in the workplace, that there are challenges that some of us who fall into these groups and communities, we have extra layers that we're fighting up against. There is systemic oppression that is currently and unfortunately still happening to this day, right? And I want us to not let those statistics discourage you from still advocating for yourself. So the only way that we're going to be able to continue to make changes within the system is to continually ring this alarm and sharing our knowledge with one another, to have courageous conversations and open dialogue about how we could advocate for ourselves and others. So how are we also thinking about how we're able to lift up others around us, right? So if you have that privilege, if you have a leadership position and you're starting to, and you want to make a change, how are we going to use your influence to be able to uplift others in this space? So if you keep doing your part and also uplifting others while you're at it, this is how we start changing the system, right? And while we may not be able to win every single battle, I can attest to you that we can win some of them, right? Again, your self-worth is not tied to the final outcome or decision of these salary negotiations or any sort of development conversations that you have. All right, so let's talk about the different types of self-advocacy that happens in the workplace. So again, while this webinar content is mostly focused on salary negotiation, I want you to really consider other ways that can help you develop yourself at your campus, right? And whether it's on campus, whether you end up transitioning to another company or another organization, what you do now is going to influence what your future career path looks like. So think about these different ways in which you could advocate for yourself, whether it's with your supervisor, your manager, your mentor, your colleagues. These are different ways in which you could advocate for perhaps more development funds or training and learning and development opportunities. And you all have such an amazing, at Berkeley, and I know at other UC campuses, you have an amazing people and culture team who has all these resources for you all, right? I want to point out another one here about the types of self-advocacy in the workplace in terms of recognition. This was a conversation I had with my last boss at the company I was at. I had to sit down and tell her, you know, what would really help me out in terms of my own engagement and how I like to be recognized. These are the ways in which you could help me out, right? I like the emails that you send. I like the Slack messages that you send me about what specifically I did well. And I need to hear that along with the constructive pieces, right? When we first started working together, she was more on the constructive side. So we had to work together on that. It's a relationship, right? Also, what types of, how you could advocate for yourself in terms of communication, right? How do you need feedback and coaching to land for you? And then again, what's some other support that you may need along the way with folks in your hype crew? Okay. So I wanted to just give a shout out to folks in my hype crew, and I'm going to flash this up real quick. But I just wanted to say, these are women in my life who have been phenomenal in making sure that I had the courage to break out on my own and to open up my own business, or would remind me of my strengths and my talents when I was at Berkeley or at my other places of employment. And so I want you to think about who's in your hype crew right now. And if you're like, Annalyn, I can't think of anyone, I don't know, or maybe I just have one person. So my challenge for you and my inquiry is, hey, how can you start building that network and expanding that even more, right? How can you have a virtual coffee with someone that you work with on campus? Or who could you reach out to whose work you've admired for many years, but maybe you were too shy to do that? It's possible. I wanted to share 2 quotes with you all. One, this reminder, #reminder, that fear is a reaction and courage is a decision. So fear is a reaction and courage is a decision. The other quote I love is from Brené Brown, who many of you are familiar with. She does a lot of work around vulnerability and courage and leadership. And I love this quote, which is, courage starts with showing up and letting ourselves be seen. I know for many of us, you know, if we come from perhaps communities of color, or if we come from immigrant families, as I identify with both of those groups. For example, I wasn't taught to advocate for myself in the workplace. In fact, my dad often told me the opposite. Just keep your head down, keep working hard, and the work will speak for itself. Don't ever rock the boat. And while I know that his intention was to keep me safe and to make sure I still had a job, that wasn't serving me in my career, right? So I had to let myself be seen and heard, and I had to have the courage within myself to shine a light on my own gifts and talents. So just, you know, softly keep that in mind, right? This is a gentle reminder that all of this, whether you're negotiating for salary, whether you want to continue to develop in your current role, or maybe you're looking at, you know, 2 roles above you, it takes courage and intentionality and deliberate action to really show up for yourself in this way and to make time for it. So I want to move us into the importance of development plans and self-advocacy plans for our next section here. And I mentioned this earlier, but I just wanted to show a visual, right? That you are in the driver's seat, my friend. So you are in the driver's seat in terms of advocating for yourself and also driving your career path forward. So while your manager, your boss, is ideally an invested partner in this and is an important person to help you along, you ultimately are the one who has the agency in going after what you want. And you have to make time for it, right? The biggest things that I have seen, the biggest challenge I have seen over the years is that there doesn't seem to be enough time for this. And what I would say is maybe start out with 5 minutes a day. Maybe it's reading a LinkedIn article. Maybe it is scheduling that coffee with someone whose work you've admired, or a leader that, you want to get to know a bit more. I heard this a while back from someone that worked at LinkedIn, which was, hey, think of a 9 to 5 rule in terms of you get to work and you do 9 minutes of development when you come in. And then at the end of the day, you do 5 minutes of development, whether that's networking, whether that's reading an article, watching a quick video. And so you're just building that muscle over time to know that you are important enough to make that time for your own growth and your own development and your own advocacy. Okay. So you're going to get into this in your coaching group, but I just wanted to flash this up because these are some of the questions that I want you to be thinking about in terms of your own self-advocacy. So one, what's your end goal, right? Is it to get a higher salary? Is it to get the training funds to go for your coaching certification? That's what I did when I was at Berkeley, to have my department support me and pay for one of my classes. What's your current challenge with this particular goal? What are some of the facts that you know, and how can you fill in those gaps? Who are the decision makers that you need to influence? And then what are some possible solutions? Okay, so I'm going to quickly run through an example of what this could look like. And if you would imagine yourself already completing a development plan, and there are plenty of great ones that I know at Berkeley, we have a bunch of different great resources. Colin can share more of it with you. I think he already just did. But let's talk about it, right? So here's a story arc and an example. So what's the end goal of advocating for yourself? And imagine that this would be a conversation with someone that you would have to influence. So whether it's your boss or maybe a mentor. So, hey, influencer, I'd love to focus our next one-on-one on sharing details of my dev plan with you. And I already identified some development actions. But first, I think it's important for me to share my values with you, right? And how that plays out in the type of work I want to do or how I want to continue to develop myself. And, after doing some reflection, I realized that here are some of the most challenging in terms of my development plan, right? My challenge is right now, and I'm making this up, right now, I'm currently working 95% with our undergrad students, but you know what I would really love is for maybe 10% of that time to be spent helping to develop our team, our staff, right? So maybe I could help out with some of our team meetings, right? Or doing an icebreaker or presenting some sort of research that I read recently on employee engagement. So what facts do you know? Here's what I know about myself. I really care about the people that I work with and for all of us to continue to develop ourselves. And that's the type of work that fulfills me, right? I believe I could get there by doing the following, or I've done a lot of soul searching and here's what I figured out. And then there's a request, right? So in terms of solutions, there's a request to say, hey, so given all that I shared, how can you help support my development plan? Or here's where I would love your help in helping me achieve action number 1, right? So you could see the story arc here of the conversation that could potentially happen with someone who has some influence on your career, right? So Colin just dropped a bunch of helpful links in the chat right now. So definitely check those out. I wanted to flash this up so you know what other important resources there are. This is not an all extensive list, but know that this is a good place to start. So the people and culture team have created some awesome resources that'll help you and guide you in getting the support that you need. So again, I'm only highlighting a few here, but there are a ton of great resources out there. All right. So, one thing that really stood out to me was there's this new UC experience conversations, and these are broad ranging conversations that happen between team members, employees, and managers that can really help you and your manager focus in on some really important topics like well-being, retention, inclusion and belonging, career development. There's a ton of great stuff over there, and I was really impressed about what I found. So again, shout out to that team for all the great resources that they have. All right. So I wanted to share some quick tips for salary negotiation before we get to Q&A. So the first thing is to understand your salary band and how your years of experience play a part into your current salary, right? So again, if you have questions on this, your manager is the first person I would, talk to. Also, you could talk to the people and culture team, folks over at compensation, right? There are people and resources on campus who could help you understand that. The second piece is identifying your salary or your money amount and other factors that are important. And I would say here, don't limit yourself. Don't be afraid to dream bigger. So maybe you have a goal of retiring early. Maybe you want to put away more money for your kids' education, or you're thinking about, I probably need to think about elderly care for myself in my later years. So whatever the case may be, identify that number and just know that different campuses have various salaries, right? So just to keep that in mind. Also, the other thing I would keep in mind here is remote work important to you? Working hybrid or being on campus. Some people love being in person, right? And maybe that's a part of the job as well. So think about all of those different factors. Talk to your manager about your compensation journey. So whether it's a reclass, salary bump, development funds, don't be afraid to have those conversations and open that door. The other one, again, identify your hype crew, right? And those who can help you continue to develop yourself. And, I would say I always heard this all the time when I was at Berkeley, is that we're a very relationship focused campus. Relationships do matter. And I would say that goes beyond Berkeley. It's any place that I've ever worked. And those relationships have helped me in my later years, whether it's, getting a new job, having a LinkedIn recommendation online that they posted for me, whether it was helping me in my business now, right? So those relationships are really important. And then the final thing I would say here is that if you are currently negotiating your salary right now, don't sell yourself short. Always ask for the higher number, okay? Always ask for more than what you originally think, and do your research. So you could look on higher ed jobs, highered.com if I could talk. So look at the salaries at highered.com, look at the UC salaries, knowing that they're probably a year or two behind and it's not always the most current, but it still gives you an idea, right? You can look at Glassdoor, etc. So know that the research that you may find, there are some numbers that may differ just because everything's contextual, right? Whew. All right, I just went through a whole lot of information, probably got your wheels turning, and I am going to pause here. So I know that there are some questions. So yes, feel free to drop your questions for me right now. I won't be able to answer all of them. And if your question does not get answered, just know that, you'll be able to have more time in your coaching groups to do so. All right. So let's see here.
Hey, before we jump in, I'm just hopeful
Yeah.
everybody can just give a virtual round of applause for you, Annalyn, for your presentation and just kind of being grounded in that space together. I'm so thankful for your empowerment of our collective, and we're really looking forward to our Q&A portion of today. We've got about 5 minutes for Q&A, folks, so go ahead, fastest fingers. Let's go ahead and get those questions in. Of course, we encourage you to continue those conversations in your group coaching sessions. Continue those conversations also, in your one-on-one coaching sessions. We have 104 that are booked today, so I know a lot of you are going to be in those conversations. And of course, check out the resources that we added into the chat, because for those who are at UC, we want you to make sure that you have access to your career development resources and staff support on your respective campus locations. So with all that to say, I've seen a couple of great questions come through, and Annalyn, I'm really curious from your perspective. Someone is asking, how do I know if it's appropriate to ask for an increase, or what's an appropriate time for me to ask for an increase? What might you sort of reflect back for that question?
Yeah, I would say that there isn't one gold standard time of year to ask. I would say if it's a curiosity that's happening for you right now, open the door, open the conversation with your manager. And it could be, you could even use this webinar as an example of like, hey, I just attended this webinar on salary negotiation, and I've actually been thinking about, where my current salary is, and can we have, whether it's right now or our next one-on-one, to kind of explore that together, right? So again, you won't always, it's not going to be a one and done. I could tell you all of that, all of you, that it's typically a multi, there's going to be several conversations probably that's going to happen. And so, I would say there's not really a right time to do it. It's just a matter of getting the courage to open that door and to say, and again, I think this webinar is a great way to open that door for that conversation.
Oh yeah, thanks, Annalyn. Got another question for you. How
Yeah.
might you navigate or manage a no to a request and still stay engaged, still keep at it, still try to make progress? What might you share there?
Yeah, I've definitely navigated that before. Haven't always gotten all the salary negotiations or up to my salary in that way. I would consider a few different things. One, asking the why. So can you share more about why I wasn't able to get a salary increase? Just so I understand the process. Is there something that I could have done differently, right? Or what do I need to do moving forward in order to potentially get this in the future? The other thing I would say is to remind yourself, again, and I keep saying this because it's like, I hear it all the time, your salary, the ultimate outcome is not tied to your self-worth, right? So are there other ways in which you could get development funds? Are there other ways in which you could think and be above the line and be more creative around this piece of, if I didn't get the salary, what else do I need in order to be successful at my job? What else would keep me engaged in this work, right? So some of it is some self-reflection and really getting clear within yourself, like, okay, so I'm not going to get what I asked for in terms of the number. What else is important to me?
Yeah, wow. Okay, cool. Building on that, you were talking a little bit about sort of that relationship piece and the connection you have with your supervisor and working with them to sort of make that case for growth. And I guess this is kind of in the space of a reclass, or maybe even to look at, hey, I'm not even up for a reclass right now. I'm talking about an adjustment to my salary, an adjustment to my compensation. So this comes back to the relational piece. What if I don't have a supportive supervisor? And this person also, it's going to come up into the Q&A. They also share, I currently do have a supportive supervisor, but the thought has crossed my mind. So that person will want to let everybody know there's a caveat there. What if you don't have a supportive supervisor? What do you do?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because not everyone is going to be supportive or open. So I would say to that person, and to any of you who can resonate with that sentiment, is who else is in my circle, right? Who else perhaps has a relationship with your supervisor that you can kind of tap into and say like, hey, so I had this conversation. Again, this requires trust and, opening yourself up. But I would say that that's part of it too, of identifying other people who may have influence on your career path. And the other piece is, I've had managers in my past where we didn't always get along, or we had very different ways of communicating. And it took a while for us to find our groove in that, right? So it's, hey, how can we work together on this piece? And I know this is easier said than done. But part of it is, okay, how can we work together on this? Or are there other people outside of this person who could help support me in my development and who may
And
have influence?
Yeah, and sort of connection to this idea. And this is going to be our sort of our last question, and then we'll
Yeah,
pass it back to you for some final thoughts and to ground us in wisdom and closing us out of our space here.
sure.
What happens when the funds are limited, but that your personal worth has earned the raise? And I think that this kind of comes back to, we are in thin margins, public higher education. But then what
Right.
happens if funds have run out? I know I've earned a raise. Now what?
Ooh, that is such a hard question to answer. And I'm just going to say it from a personal standpoint, is that number going to prevent you from engaging in the work well? Is it going to, how is your attitude moving forward? If there are feelings of resentment, or you're just feeling like maybe they don't value me, right? And I know I'm worth more than this. Maybe it's time to start broadening your horizons and looking elsewhere. Where else can another place possibly meet you where you're absolutely wanting to go? And that's a hard one, right? And honestly, what I always say is like, I'm always looking. Like if I work for a company or an organization, I always have my eye on what else is out there, because you can't just put all your eggs in one basket, especially in this economy. But I would say that regardless of the economy, I'm always open to other opportunities, and someone told me this one time where it's like, yeah, I'm always job searching. I'm always kind of open, because you never know, right? You never know what is the right fit for you at this time and in your life. So I know that that's a really tough one to answer, but sometimes it is like, is this my time to leave? Right?
Yeah,
Like,
and
this is my time to expand.
but let's be real. We're in real talk zone right now, and thank you for sharing that might be a reality that some folks are facing. So keeping your peripheral open to opportunities may be a way to go for some folks in this space. And we want to empower folks to find what is meaningful to them and that is aligned with their values. And I think that
Absolutely.
we so appreciate you, Annalyn. What kind of final thought do you want to leave us with today before we start closing out and having folks transition to their group coaching in
Yeah.
just a few moments here?
Yeah. So I just want to close out by saying thank you. Thank you, Colin, who's been an amazing person to work with for the
Okay,
Now
thanks.
conference. Him and I got along right off the bat. So thank you to you, to UC Berkeley, for hosting such an amazing conference and continuing to um, allow people this space to really think about and reflect on their own development. So just shout out to you all. And then the last thing I would say is I always like giving some gifted bonuses at the end of my talk. So let's keep in touch. Add me on LinkedIn. Would love to continue. And I'm also offering this. So I have a top 10 self-advocacy list on my website. So, take a picture of that QR code. And I talk a lot about some of the things that we mentioned in today's webinar, but it's a great little resource for you. So take a picture of that. And the other thing is that I'm also offering just a handful of 90-minute sessions on how you could revolutionize your life, right? So if you're interested in working with a coach, i.e. me, or if you just explore or you want to explore, like, what does that look like? I want to talk more in depth with someone who's really going to support me from an outside neutral perspective. I'm here for it. So if you're interested in that, take a look at that QR code, and I'd love to meet with you. And here's the rest of my handles. Would love to keep in touch. So Yeah, I would just say it takes courage to show up for yourself and to, have these conversations where you are putting yourself out there, right? You are sharing parts of yourself that sometimes you may think may speak for itself, but it really is, you are in the driver's seat, and there are resources and people who are going to support you in this journey. So it was a pleasure. It was an honor to hold this space, and I look forward to hearing from you all at some point.
Awesome. Thanks, Annalyn. And for those who are headed over to their group coaching sessions, you can go ahead and head over there, and you'll find those invitations from Now Coaching HQ at berkeley.edu. For some of our questions that were left unanswered, a little bit more in the technical space, so we would encourage you to reach out to your compensation team at your respective campus or location, reach out to your ASR business partner, share some of these questions with them, engage in these conversations to kind of continue your advocacy and to continue getting clarity on what's important to you. With that, thank you all so much for engaging in the Now conference this week. Feel free to grab the QR code for the session evaluation on the Now conference website. With that, have a fabulous rest of your day in group coaching sessions and your one-on-one sessions, and we'll see you next year in 2024. One more round of applause for Annalyn, everybody. Thank you so much, Annalyn, for your fabulous presentation. Have fun with the rest of your day, y'all. Take care.
Take care, everybody.